Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Wild.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the spiciest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sarah Sahagian.
And I'm Sadaf and Sarah, and we would like to welcome you all back to our show. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus. You've probably noticed. Well, okay, maybe more than a little, about 2 years, but we are officially back. The show hasn't changed too much. We're still going to be breaking pop culture stories down like we always have, but this time with a little bit more of a personal touch. You're going to get to know us a little bit better. So why don't we reintroduce ourselves? Sarah, remind our listeners what you do and what's new.
So I am still a producer and writer and nonprofit executive. I actually run a lovely nonprofit called the Rainbow Songs Foundation that brings music classes and music therapy to Greater Toronto area shelters. And I am delighted to be back with all of our fans, and we have taken to referring to you as hotties. So we're delighted to be back with you, our hotties.
Hopefully you're all very happy with that name. And I am pretty much exactly the same. I'm still a workaholic, still a little bit crazy. My biggest development is my new puppy, Omar, a golden doodle, and the legit love of my life, because who needs men when you've got a fur baby? I'm going to dedicate this episode to Omar, also because I warn you, you will probably hear him a little here and there in the background. But when it comes to today's episode, it is about another man. I got to give it up to him. Ryan Reynolds. Sarah, what's your initial take on Ryan Reynolds?
So I have been familiar with Ryan since the 90s. I watched Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place. Not necessarily for Ryan Reynolds. I found it a genuinely diverting sitcom when I was, a teen. But I have been, I guess, familiar with Ryan's oeuvre for a very long time. His evolution is fascinating. I like that he does a lot for nonprofits as a nonprofit executive. I appreciate what he's done for organizations like Sick Kids. But I also think that it's really fascinating how he's been able to rebrand himself. So I'm excited to talk about some of the things he's kind of memory hold in his past.
Ooh, also please use the word oeuvre again at any time. I loved that. Thank you. Yeah, I know this man has a ton of fans. Okay, so I won't lie. I do find him extremely charming, and I do think he's funny, but I also think he's a little tired, and I think Sarah agrees with me on this, and I'm sure some of you do too. Okay, so personally, I most enjoyed him back in his Van Wilder days, and even early Deadpool. I loved the first movie. But now I feel like I've just had enough. He's too seemingly perfect and sterile and blah, and I'm sorry, but that just doesn't do it for me. I want more from my leading men. I want like a little bit of a dark, creepy quality, if you will. Okay, but before we dig deeper, I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer, a quick one. I'm sure most Canadians are very well aware that Ryan is a Vancouver boy. His dad was even an RCMP. He also went to school with Joshua Jackson, so basically his blood is super red and white. He started acting at just 13, mostly in Canadian shows like Hillside and The Odyssey. I remember The Odyssey very well. I loved that show. But when he started making a name for himself, it was in the late 90s and early 00s. So that's when you've got those comedies like Sarah's fave, Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, my fave, Van Wilder, and then obviously you've got Blade Trinity, which, like, who remembers that? I hope we all do. And Amityville Horror, the remake, which my dad personally loved out of all the remakes.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like Just Friends, though, was his big breakout. It really showed he could be funny, he could be fearless, which also, by the way, gives me another opportunity to say how much I love and miss Anna Faris.
Yeah.
But alas, that's a whole other episode that we will definitely get into. But next up was his rom-com era. I think Hollywood noticed how conventionally hot and charming he was, so it kind of made sense. And listen, he is solid at them. I love Definitely Maybe. The Proposal is pretty solid. Sarah, what did you make of Ryan's career just before Deadpool? Did you have any favorites other than Two Guys, a Girl?
Definitely Maybe. That's a favorite of mine.
one.
And Definitely Maybe makes no sense,
No, it
okay?
doesn't.
Because if a child knows anything about their mother, they're going to be able to figure out who it is. And then if you are changing the details to fool her, which he at one point says he is, then it's not the story of how he met her mother. So there's no point in telling that. It's a weird, weird concept. It was a strange framing device. It's such a weird movie, and yet it is incredibly charming.
It is.
I mean, he and Isla Fisher have great chemistry.
Yeah.
I really was rooting for them. I loved how they met on the Clinton campaign.
Yeah, if you don't know about this, please give it a watch. Honestly, it's batshit in terms of timeline. She's absolutely right. Sarah always here to debunk ludicrous rom-com plot lines, which they are becoming more and more so. I miss the old ones, like when you would run for the love of your life to the top of the Empire State Building and be led in after dark. Not that that makes any sense.
Hi, Omar.
protests this. Yeah, there's Omar. He protests this too. He did not like Definitely Maybe.
No, Omar is a fan. I mean, he's a purist. I feel like he'd be a Nora Ephron fan.
I think so too. I hope he is because she's my fave. But here's my question for you, Sarah. Do you feel like he played a solid romantically? Do you think he was better as a comedy guy, or maybe an action hero?
I actually think he's good at romantic comedy. He's good at the combination of romance and comedy. He's able to integrate that well into The Proposal and into Definitely Maybe. Like, he's so ludicrously handsome, and yet he almost sells the idea that he's this unlucky in love sad sack in Definitely
Yeah.
Maybe, right? He really commits to the ridiculous premise of any rom-com where you've got like this really hot guy who like can't find a partner, right?
Yeah. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I think he's a good rom-com leading man. And for some reason, the rom-coms he made, other than The Proposal, weren't huge hits and haven't been classics. But Definitely Maybe isn't any worse than a lot of rom-coms that have kind of become classics. I'm not gonna make any comparisons because I don't want people to yell at me. But there are certain movies from the 90s that I don't think are any better.
Yeah, Sarah, that's for another time because I think we're gonna end up fighting. But I do completely agree with you. I will say this. Okay, with Deadpool, he does get to be all of the things that I think he was fine at. He gets to be funny. He gets to be a flirt. He gets to be an action lead. I will tell you, because I know we've talked about this, that it does seem like he's very much playing himself. I do think that's the case. Now, in 2018, he told The New Yorker he does interviews as Deadpool out of anxiety, insisting that this is not who he is. But hey, maybe this is one of those things where like the two have started to blur and there's no boundary anymore. I don't know. I don't totally buy what he's claiming.
It's his Sasha Fierce.
Oh, I love that. Okay, Ryan, this show's gonna end up making me love him? I don't know. I strongly doubt it, but let's see. I think here's the thing with this guy. He's made a lot of money and he knows how to make that money. And we're gonna get into that a little bit more. But basically what I mean is when it comes to movies, he knows how to move with the wind. And that's pretty beneficial. And I do think with Deadpool, he's found his lane. So let's rewind though how we got here because it was a long road to Deadpool. In 2011, he did Green Lantern, which was heinous. Though it did introduce him to his current wife, co-star Blake Lively, who we will also get to more on later. Also, by the way, Sarah, very shocked to discover that Peter Sarsgaard was in Green Lantern, who I love so much.
I know.
Right? I guess we all need an easy check sometimes. I can't hate, but
he needs money too, right? Like that's why he did Presumed Innocent, I'm assuming, as well. Peter Sarsgaard is a happy capitalist.
Sarah, I liked Presumed Innocent.
Oh, really?
Okay. We'll talk after this episode. Okay, so now so many of the reviews for Green Lantern, which I'm sure so many of you read or heard about, kind of trashed Ryan's work as a hero and also the way that he used humor.
Mhm.
I will happily watch a hot man make a fool of himself in green tights that reveal far too much, but I also could not get through this movie, and I actually tried a couple of times. The movie just felt super cheap, it felt underwritten, and it had 4 screenwriters, although I think that's probably part of the problem.
Yeah.
If not one of you can get it right and there's too many cooks in the kitchen, etc., etc. But Green Lantern did lay the groundwork for Deadpool, whose humor is dirtier and more sarcastic, and whose
Mhm.
production team, Marvel, put the money in, and we know they got a fuck ton of that. Ryan
Mhm.
championed bringing it to the big screen before he even first played a version of the character in 2009's X-Men Origins: Wolverine. He teamed up with writer-director David S. Goyer in 2004 to conceptualize the character and film, and was a perfect fit to star as he'd already been mentioned in the comics long before, with Deadpool once being referred to as, quote, Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Sharpay. LOL, sure, why not? I'll allow it.
Okay.
Now, after some rights issues between studios, and honestly, I could go on about this forever. There was so much drama here. Look it up if you're intrigued. I'm going to summarize it for you. The project did hit pause and only really got going in 2010, but the timing wasn't great because Green Lantern bombed the year after. That means that studio execs were not impressed with Ryan. They were not keen all of a sudden. But then someone mysteriously leaked test footage. Ryan has long claimed that it was not him. I don't know. But fans went apeshit when they saw the test footage. They fell madly in love. As we all know, the movie became a massive hit. Deadpool earned nearly $800 million against a $58 million budget. That's insane money. And it became
Mhm.
the highest grossing R-rated film at the time. It also put Ryan back on the map, bigger than ever, earning him rave reviews, while the movie even got 2 Golden Globe nominations, though honestly those awards really shouldn't matter much.
Yeah.
Since then, we've had 2 sequels, 2018's Deadpool 2 and this summer's Deadpool and Wolverine, which looks like Ryan held a gun to his buddy Hugh Jackman's head and demanded they make this. I'm sorry, that man does not look thrilled in any of the
No.
previews or the press junkets. Okay, so as trying as I now find the character of Deadpool, I can give Ryan kudos for making his own work, also for changing the industry in a small but considerably pretty big way. Doing an action movie with an R rating, willing to take it in this direction, is something. We will give him kudos for that. He told GQ in 2018, however, quote, 11 years I've been trying to get the Sisyphus rock up the hill and it kept rolling back on top of me. So I'm going to be all the fuck over it from the moment it starts to the moment it finishes. Sounds like a threat. Sarah, what
Yeah.
do you make of this? Are you a Deadpool gal?
It's fine. It's not my jam. I don't go to Marvel for sardonic humor. I go to Marvel for, candy colored, nonsensical fights in outer space, right? I want
Fair.
Thor. I want idealism. I want it to be cheesy in a fun way. And if I wanted more sophisticated, darker humor, I would just watch Succession, is kind of how I feel. So that's not what I go to my superheroes for. But I am happy for the people who like Deadpool. I do think it's funny. I think it's well made. I think it fits Ryan. It's very unlike the other superhero movies out there because I mean DC is way too serious. It's way too dramatic. And
Tries too
then
hard, too desperate.
yeah, and most of Marvel is for tweens, right? And that's not a shot at it. I mean, tweens need entertainment too, but it's for parents and tweens to watch together. So I understand how he found this niche. I think it's really smart that he decided to go all in on Deadpool. It's not for me, but I'm happy for him that he made it work. It does have to be said though that only a white man would get this many chances, right? Like if he had
Well
been a
said.
woman, if he had been a man of color, he would not have gotten to have this many flops and still been a superhero, right? He was a superhero and it didn't work out. So the fact that people bet on him again to be a superhero actually is nonsensical to me. It's ridiculous, and he is the poster boy for white male privilege.
Ugh, Sarah, I love you for saying all of that. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. I think if it had been a woman, I don't even know that she would have gotten past Blade Trinity, which
Yeah.
Ryan survived. Which, by the way, let's recall Jessica Biel was in that one. Jessica Biel might be the best comparison to Ryan
Mhm.
Reynolds in terms
Yeah.
of the way they started, right? And
Mhm.
both very MTV Movie Awards type people.
Mhm. Yep.
Both really tried to make a
Mhm.
trajectory. They both had a similar trajectory, I'll say. And she's really kind of gotten a little bit lost in her career, I think, over time. I think she's
Yeah.
definitely had some good gigs recently. You and I both loved Candy, the miniseries, which
So
I highly
good.
recommend. So good. But it doesn't matter because people aren't paying attention the way that they used to. Who is paying
Yeah.
attention? Everybody's paying attention to Ryan fucking Reynolds. And I think Jessica Biel actually has more acting chops. Never thought that I'd be defending her on this show, but there you go.
She's become a very good actor, kind of
She
like
has.
Robin Wright sort of developed into
Ooh.
a good actor. I think that there are a lot of similarities, and I really like how Jessica Biel has produced her own projects. I think she
Yes.
has good taste. I mean, her husband should stop drinking and driving, but that's not her fault. She didn't do that. Uh,
The husband being Justin Timberlake, for whoever
yes,
doesn't
being
know.
Justin Timberlake. I just think that really it shows you how interesting and how sexist our society is, because Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds both became famous for being hot, right? Before Jessica Biel was a good actress, because on Seventh Heaven she wasn't. She was very conventionally attractive,
Yeah.
as was Ryan. And then men are allowed to continue to be sex symbols well into their 40s, and women are not. So once she aged out of being an ingenue because she wasn't Meryl Streep level talented, there were literally no roles for her.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Sarah, we are so back. I love this. Now, okay, so let's step back into Ryan. We're gonna try. One of the more interesting things about him is that a lot like fellow 90s dude, I'm about to make another comparison here, Ashton Kutcher, he's not banked everything on being an actor, which I do think is interesting. And
Yeah.
I don't know that he's the type dreaming of an Oscar or an Emmy anyway, right? In another timeline, I think maybe he could have taken a whack at a Tony.
Yeah.
Sometimes his Deadpool gives me that vibe. He could get
Yeah.
there. Not saying I want a Deadpool musical, although that's probably inevitable in itself.
You obviously do, Sadaf. Come on.
We'll go together. We'll go together. I know we'll have
I'll
a
go.
ticket.
I'll see a
I'll go.
Deadpool
I'll
musical.
go. Send me a free ticket, guys. He's a businessman above all else. That's what led him to craft Deadpool rather impressively and make it into an empire. It's what's got him doing, frankly, shitty kids movies like Detective Pikachu and If. Although, Sarah, you have a daughter, I don't have a child, so you tell me if you think they're shitty.
If it's inappropriate, because he's like a middle-aged imaginary friend person who's like hanging out with a 12-year-old girl, and I had to turn the movie off because it was so bizarre. My friend, one of my close mom friends, saw this with her kids, and she's like, "Listen, my kid hated it so much she asked to leave." She was
Oh
just
my
like finished her
God.
popcorn and was like, "I want to go home."
Wow.
And so I watched it on a plane. I didn't show it to my 4-year-old, and everything my friend, shout out to her, said is true. It is inappropriate that
Wow.
there's this middle-aged man who's hanging out with this 12-year-old. They're trying to match imaginary friends with kids. The premise is a little bit uncomfortable. So I was not a fan. I think if you read the script, you should have better judgment than to do this role. I understand that he's friends with John Krasinski, and that John Krasinski is a little bit of a Hollywood golden boy at the moment because of A Quiet Place. But John Krasinski needs to stay in his lane, and he can't write children's movies. That's my
Ooh.
verdict.
Ouch. I love a spicy verdict. I think John Krasinski's lane should be, because just like Ryan Reynolds, I think he gets stuck playing himself, aka Jim from The Office. I think John Krasinski is a really skilled screenwriter, but I agree with you, perhaps not for children's movies. He can write a good drama. Maybe that's where he should go. And write for your wife, okay? Because she's the one with the acting talent in the family. Not to be taking so many hits at so many white couples today, but that's what we're doing, I guess. Yeah, I agree with you. Although I will say, I do think we're in an era right now where there's a lot of sensitivity towards anything that could hint at something being particularly perverse. But again, I'm not a parent, so I don't know how movies like that would read. I just find them kind of lame and corny, to be honest with you, and especially if that's all you're doing. But again, another episode for another time. Now, in his businessman era, Ryan Reynolds is making a ton of investments, and they're really smart investments. I feel like a lot of folks, especially if you're particularly online, if you're a fan of his, if you like to drink, you'll know that back in 2018, he acquired a stake in Aviation American Gin, which is actually quite good, with plans to creative direct its marketing and branding campaigns. 2 years later, it was acquired for up to $610 million. That's insane. He's
Yep.
also invested in Mint Mobile, Wealth Simple, Fubo TV, the list goes on. He's got his own production company, obviously, and he's on the board of Match Group. So you can imagine what kind of Tinder or Hinge ads he might one day star in, I'm sure. Now, his biggest investment, or flashiest, I should say, was his purchase of the Welsh soccer team Wrexham AFC, alongside buddy and fellow actor Rob McElhenney. Ever the entrepreneur, Ryan pivoted that into a 2022 docuseries called Welcome to Wrexham, which was just renewed for its 4th season. And it actually did put Emmys on Ryan's shelf, which is wild. He and Rob most recently also invested in an F1 team, so their domination is only just getting started. Sarah, what do you think Ryan's business card says? Actor or savvy entrepreneur?
No, honestly, he's a very savvy entrepreneur. I think Ryan likes money. I think he
Yeah.
probably went into acting because he was super handsome and people are like, you'll get rich. And he did. And now he is finding a way to get richer. He is going to be a multi-billionaire. I actually, if he had been born in America, I think he could become president. I think he's that level of ambitious, but he was
Wow.
not born there. So that can't happen for him. But I could see him being an ambassador to some country someday. I could see that happening for him. Listen, he is clearly very strategic. He likes the influence. I'm going to guess he likes the influence that he gets from having money.
Yeah.
And money is power. He's never going to be Daniel Day-Lewis. So I think
Ooh.
at a certain point you have to take a look in the mirror and think, okay, so I'm not going to win 4 Oscars. If I like power and influence, how can I be my most influential self? And that's probably to make some really smart investments, which
Yeah.
he has done.
I agree. I think the most he might ever get, and hey, again, we could be wrong. I don't think Sarah and I are ever. Well, Sarah's sometimes wrong. I'm never wrong. But I will say, hey, maybe he'll like produce an Oscar-winning movie one day. Maybe that's as far as he'll get. I don't know. But I agree with you, Sarah. Well said. He's no DDL. Now, before we dig a little deeper, why don't we take a quick little break? We'll be right back. Pour yourself a little aviation gin, why don't you? And we're back. Now, in just the last year, as the new Deadpool movie was promoing, Wrexham was going, and Ryan continued to be just about everywhere. I'm sure you've all noticed. I, though, started to notice folks turning on him again, but with a new edge. I've seen tweets pondering if everyone already knew he was so annoying or if this was news, and TikToks calling back his old movies as if he's already set for a Lifetime Achievement Award. Rob McElhenney, by the way, has his own cult fans, as he should, and many have said on social media that they feel Ryan is killing their love for him and killing his image. That's a bit of a yikes. Let's break down why, though. No matter how strong a moneymaker Ryan is or how indelible he is from Deadpool, his shtick has become outdated. And here's the worst part about it, he hasn't noticed. His humor is becoming grating, and his usual charm and sheen don't work anymore, at least not on some of us. I think people generally tend to prefer their male stars to have a little more edge to them, and he's got none. And that dulls the personas of everyone he's associated with, including Rob and Hugh Jackman, who recently co-starred with Blake Lively in a Vogue cover shoot that also suggested a gun had yet again been held to his head. It was a terrible cover shoot, I'm sorry to say.
It's awful.
Yeah, so Sarah, I'm curious from you, have you had enough of Ryan Reynolds? Have we had enough? Is it time to call it a wrap?
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, I'm not saying that he should just completely go away forever, but I am a little bit sick of his aw shucks super wholesome image, his squeaky clean image. It's also just not even true. I mean, Alanis Morissette wrote an entire breakup album about the man. It sounds like he broke up with her very abruptly. I've never been a huge fan. I think he's pretty one note. I really thought it was funny when he did funny as in a little bit hypocritical when he did that ad with the woman who was in the Peloton ad for his booze company,
I
right?
don't
As though like he was
remember this.
saving her from this abusive husband who was
Oh
pressuring her into
God.
working out. Okay, he's in so many movies that have so little body diversity, and
Mm.
I don't know if we can really say that he has the moral high ground to make a parody like that. That's just my take.
Actually, that's a really interesting point. I think one thing that's so great about powerful producers in Hollywood, especially when it's actors turned producers, is when they give more opportunity to more marginalized talent. And
Mhm.
he has the ability to do that. He has big pull with Netflix. He's got so much, as we've said, investments. He's got a massive portfolio at this point. He can probably get pretty much anything greenlit.
Mhm.
But you're right. He tends to work with the same people again and again, and it's the same kind of content again and again. And I get it. If you don't care about what you're making, you just care about the check, maybe
Yeah.
that doesn't bother you, but it would make him more appealing, I think, to a whole new demographic if he were able to make that space. I think that could be one way he could win us back. Otherwise, I do think for a lot of people, sometimes overexposure is a thing, and his media team needs to look into that ASAP because I think he's hitting that point right now. And actually, now is as good a time as any to touch on how exactly he's rubbed off on Blake. No pun intended. So sorry for that. First, let's review Ryan's unusual and shocking dating history. Making
Yep.
for an uber Canadian pairing, Ryan dated Alanis Morissette in
Mhm.
2002. I love this fact. They met at Drew Barrymore's birthday party that
So
year.
cute.
Yeah. The two were engaged but split in 2007 before any wedding bells could ring. Little has been said directly about this time from Ryan, which I think is interesting, though Alanis did say she made her 2008 album Flavors of Engagement about her grief over the breakup. She said specifically the song Torch was about him. Here's a little snippet.
I miss your smell and your style and your pure.
Now, the lyrics aren't too subtle and are completely adoring, with Alanis saying she loved everything about this man, from his smell and his style to his body and warmth and the idea of even raising kids together. She even once called him her soul brother and herself a love addict. So, make of that what you will. Now, for his part, the only times Ryan mentioned his time with Alanis was as Deadpool, go figure. He used his relationship for that damn character. In 2016, while promoting Deadpool on the Today Show, he sang her iconic lyric, "Isn't it ironic?" That same year, in an interview he did as Deadpool with Entertainment Weekly, he said his favorite holiday was Alanis Morissette Day, which, by the way, is real. It's March 8th. Mark your iCals, please. Thank you. Now, here's where things get messy. Ryan began dating Scarlett Johansson, surprise if you didn't know that already, right after the breakup and as Alanis' album about him dropped. Side note, Scarlett was 23, he was 31. Classic.
Yep.
Sarah, I know you've got a theory about the timeline here and you've got a ton of thoughts on his
Yep.
relationship timeline. Please enlighten us.
So I think that, I mean, an 8-year age gap isn't necessarily sketchy, but a
Yeah.
23-year-old is not really an adult. We know from neuroscience that their brains aren't even fully developed, and he was in his 30s.
Also, there's
So,
something about, like, you go from a woman your age to someone so much younger. That's the ick for me.
yeah, that there is an ick there. And also, I don't know, she's sort of intimated over the years that if anything, maybe she was pressured into marrying him, or at the very least, she didn't understand marriage. She wasn't ready to get married, right? He was in his 30s. He'd been engaged before. He definitely was ready to get married to someone. And she has said in interviews that she didn't really know what marriage was when she got married to him, right? And she's 23. Of course she didn't, right? She's so young. She's barely out of adolescence. So I think that marrying someone who you can tell if somebody doesn't understand what marriage is, right? You're in your 30s. You can tell if she's not really getting what this commitment means. That's wrong. At the very least, I don't have any sympathy for him for the fact that he had to get divorced because that was foolish. But
Yeah.
at worst, it's kind of sketchy and maybe almost predatory. And she's also implied that their marriage didn't last because her career eclipsed his, and it definitely did. His career was terrible during their marriage. But I think that also gives me the ick. I don't know. everything about his relationship with Scarlett Johansson to me undermines the image that he's established for himself today, which is like, I'm this wholesome dad and
Yeah.
husband, I'm perfect, I'm such a feminist friendly superhero. Like, well, you were like any other Hollywood douche who went after the hottest girl of the moment who was way too young for you and wasn't ready to get married, and then you kind of made her marry you anyway. I mean, not made, he didn't hold a gun to her head, but you know when someone's not ready to get married and you pressure them to get married anyway. You know you're doing that. He's a smart guy. He must have known on some level that she was not really fully into the idea of getting married, or at least didn't understand what it meant.
I think so too, and I think we could also probably read that relationship as a rebound from Alanis. As we always say every episode, disclaimer, we don't know these people, shocker. So we can't really know for sure. But I will say the two were engaged in 2008 after a year of dating and were married in Tofino, BC. Cool, cute, very Canadian again. 2 years later, they split. Again, Ryan has never said much about this relationship either, which I also find fascinating. And while it may speak well to his privacy, there's something about it all that just makes me suspicious that he doesn't ever say a word. I don't know. Maybe the grass is always greener. We always want what we're not getting. Maybe I'm projecting. I don't know. The most recent thing Scarlett said about him is that he's a good guy. That was on Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop podcast in 2023.
Okay.
Good old Gwynny was raving about him, and I feel like the way she kind of set up, the conversation made it so that Scarlett couldn't really deviate. And Scarlett didn't seem to be disgusted though by what she was saying, but she did seem to end the conversation at that. And I think that's a great sign of someone who's like, I don't want to get into this any deeper. I already have, as Sarah has shared what she said in the past. And hey, maybe the truth may very well be that he was a great guy to date. I don't know. But one of the other more recent things Scarlett has said, now that she's on her more recent marriage to Colin Yost, which is a whole other like red flag to me, Jesus God. But she said it's cool getting to be married to someone who has compassion, suggesting that the other man she was with did not have any. So again, make of that what you will.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, on to Blake Lively. So Ryan met Blake and co-starred with her on Green Lantern in 2011. The pair remained friends, probably friends with benefits, let's be real, and began dating that year and were married a year later on a plantation in South Carolina.
Yikes.
Yeah, Sarah looks horrified right now. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, this was an incredibly bad taste. This one note has haunted the couple for years, with many writing them off since then. While I do think that's fair, I also have a strong inkling the reason most folks have written them off for this is because it's easy. Both apologized after the criticism hit, and sure, maybe they weren't aware in their lily white bubble of what they were doing. Blake definitely seems the type who's fantasized about a plantation-style wedding since birth.
Yes.
So, there's definitely some fault there. The pair have 4 kids. They live a very domestic life in upstate New York, where they often hang out with very good friend Taylor Swift. If you don't know Blake, I'd love for you to discover the better half of this couple. In my opinion, I find her to be an absolute shining sun. Again, Sarah is grimacing. You can't all see this. But I'm a lively gal ever since Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. If the likes of America Ferrera and Alexis Bledel love you to this day, you're good in my book, okay? Ever since her flawless nose job, allegedly, ever since Serena van der Woodsen made me feel alive and murdered a man, spoiler alert, she comes from a B-list Hollywood family and definitely was making a name of her own before Ryan came along, but likely would never have reached the heights of fame she has without him. I'm really sorry to say, Blake, but I think it's true. The fact is, the girl's gone far, largely based on beauty, of which she has a ton. She is a very hot, beautiful woman. I'd like to sniff and sleep in that mane of golden hair myself, I will not lie. But she's made some odd career choices, and she stepped away from the screen since they got together to build a family. I personally think she was really fucking great in A Simple Favor and in A Sharp Suit. Yes, underrated.
Great movie. No, actually, like an excellent movie. It is art. It is cinema. More people should see it.
Absolutely. Chef's kiss to it from both of us. But, since then, where the hell has she been? She had impeccable style without a stylist, but even that's fallen off the wagon a bit recently. Knock on wood. Someone get this girl some help. Sarah, what do you make of Blake? Unleash. Tell me how you feel.
don't hate her. Listen, it's really hard for me to separate her from Serena van der
Yeah.
Woodsen, who was one of the most boring characters, in my opinion, who has ever
That's
been
true.
in a teen
In that
drama.
cast, yeah.
So boring. I was always a Leighton Meester fan. It really upset me the way Leighton Meester didn't break bigger out of that show, because I thought she was incredibly talented. And that's not
Yeah.
Blake's fault. I think Leighton is. I have often referred to her as the Susan Lucci of our generation. I think she needs to find
Ooh.
another great soap.
Wow.
She just is so watchable, and she's so good at playing the same character from week to week, but showing you different sides of them. I mean, TV acting is a skill, and people often assume it's easier than movie acting, but it's hard to keep the same character scintillating, and she succeeds at that.
Yeah.
Whereas Blake was not able to do that with Serena, and part of it was also it's not as compelling a character, and maybe the writers stopped writing really interesting fodder for her. But Blake is fine. She's completely innocuous. She seems to live a nice life baking with her children. She got Martha Stewart to plan her wedding, which is a privilege. Wouldn't all of us love to have Martha Stewart as our wedding planner? I've always just felt like she was somebody who seemed to have just such a charmed life, right? Like it never seemed like she had to work for anything. She's one of the few women in Hollywood who I guess could sort of make missteps and actually be given second chances. Like she was in Green Lantern too. Like she was in it as well. And it was such a big disappointment that most actresses would have been all but written off after that. And she hasn't been. She and Ryan are just the luckiest couple in Hollywood. I'm like, good for them.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that she seems to have lots of fulfilling friendships. She and Taylor, I hope that they laugh in the old folks' home together. I hope that friendship lasts forever. I have to say, though, if you're looking for a wife who isn't going to eclipse you professionally, Blake seems like the type of traditionalist who would work hard not to be more successful than her husband. So she's a good choice. She's an even younger actress than Scarlett Johansson, just as hot, less careerist. So for Ryan, that seems like the right choice.
Damn, Sarah. Okay, yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that and pinpointed on that. Yeah, for sure. And by the way, justice for Leighton Meester. I'm so with you. Love that woman. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think what's interesting about these two is they project perfection. But what is perfection in Hollywood? It seems to be mediocrity with a white face and blonde hair. And maybe these two are perfectly matched because they are mediocre in the very same ways, right? But let's fast forward to today. So Blake is starring in a lukewarm adaptation of YA author Colleen Hoover's horrifically sugary book, It Ends With Us. I know I'm losing a lot of listeners today. I'm so sorry. But it doesn't matter what I think. All of Colleen's books are massive hits with young millennials, Gen Z, and the moderately illiterate. So sorry. But this movie does have eyes. In fact, it killed it at the box office this opening weekend, as we record this. So this is a big win for Blake. Here's what's fun. It Ends With Us is in theaters at the same time as Deadpool. So Blake and Ryan have been doing a ton of cross promotion. She shared that she was the basis for Lady Deadpool and hit the movie's red carpet dressed as what she'd probably wear, while he hit the It Ends With Us premiere with Hugh Jackman as his date. Again, there's the gun at the head, I'm telling you. Ryan even produced It Ends With Us, and he rewrote one scene. So it's all led to rumors that the pair took over production from director Justin Baldoni, aka the hot man from Jane the Virgin, so they could promote their own stuff, which is pretty wild. And again, the box office is killing it. So what does this say for the couple? Only good things. For them, it's a smart move. A good chunk of their fans likely overlap. And as a couple, these two are pretty beloved because, again, they're quote unquote perfect. One doubts they even argue. Blake likely caresses the toilet seat lovingly when Ryan leaves it up, I imagine. She's also learned from the best. Just as her new movie dropped, she announced a new hair care line called Blake Brown, which is apparently her government name. And when Ryan hit out with Aviation Gin, Blake put out her own drink mix line called Betty Buzz, which they'd also co-campaigned over. This year, she's also debuting Betty Booze, a sister alcohol line. And lest we forget, this woman started a lifestyle brand called Preserve back in 2014, which shuttered after a year because, well, obviously. For the record, it largely sold Southern-themed wedding items.
Yeah.
Great idea to remind us of that. Yikes. Anyway, in an interview with Vogue in 2015, Blake got refreshingly candid and said the site ended up having the crutch of a, quote, I'm a celebrity, people will care what I have to say nature, which is awareness. I love awareness. These two don't seem to have that, but evidently there are moments of it. Now, either way, as a couple and as individuals, what Ryan and Blake have built is a brand, and they've monetized it really, really well. I will warn you now, no, you cannot buy as squeaky clean a relationship as theirs. Frankly, I find it sinister more than anything. Blake is giving white Meghan Markle, and I fear that won't end well. I also need him to get off her and for her to get to work and show her the world she has talent where her husband has none. My takeaway, charm can get you everywhere when you're attractive and white with even whiter teeth. But even if that check is huge, sometimes overexposure can kill. Take a break, Ryan, I beg of you. And maybe go behind the camera for a while. Sarah, what do you think?
We want him to go behind the camera?
Yes, stay behind the camera.
Do we think well, maybe as a producer, I don't think he
That's
could
what
be
I mean.
director.
That's what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But the thing is, I don't know if he has good enough taste to choose great projects.
So
I don't know.
Go
I think
away.
he should...
Don't do anything.
Well, no, he can just invest in businesses. He's very entrepreneurial. He has a lot of business sense. So I think he should just go do that. I could see him being on the board at Disney or things like that. So I think he can do things. I think he can have a career. I just don't really care for him as an actor at this point. I don't know. Okay, let's see him as a producer. I'm curious to see if he completely devotes himself to being a producer. What comes from that? I am curious.
Maybe he can pull a John Krasinski and just make content for his wife. I don't know. Although, even if he did do that, what would that be? Lady Deadpool, which I'm sure is in our fucking future? Jesus. Anyway, this brings us to our final segment, which I'm sure you've missed. Hindsight is 2024, where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were the subject of the story. I'm tired of talking about Ryan, so I'm just going to say I would like Blake to have never have made Preserve, because I think it's a very unfortunate pockmark on her career. Yeah. Sarah, what would it be for you?
Ryan shouldn't have married a 23-year-old. That's just don't do that when you're in your 30s. That's completely inappropriate. I know times have changed, but it wasn't super appropriate at that time. It's not like he married her in 1953. Just don't do that. Marry people whose brains are fully developed. Your brain is still developing until you're 25. Ryan, you are a grown-ass adult man. I expect more from you. And I know that now you're married to someone else and that was years ago, but I really can't forgive him for that. I'm still mad about it to this day.
I'm so on board with you on that, and honestly, this is a message to all men. Okay, here's Sarah. Hear her good. Rewind that if you need to. And that brings us to the end of this episode. This time, I promise, we will indeed be back next week tackling the spiciest celeb news of the week and changing things up a little. Now, if you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf and Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Sarah Sahagian, and if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. And if you'd like us to keep growing, we'd love for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thereheat, where we've got some goods in store for you. Thanks for listening.